Hello there, welcome to chapter 4 of Street Child. Hopefully you're enjoying the story and you're getting some writing done as well. If you're not doing the writing, you're just listening to the story to enjoy it, then fantastic. That's what it's all about, for you to enjoy your reading and to enjoy your writing. We're now at chapter 4, and so far in the story, the girls, Lizzie and Emily, have been left at the big house with Rosie and Judd, and Jim has left with his mother into the big wide world. So we'll find out now what has happened to them. So, chapter 4. Jim and his mother walked for most of that day, but made very slow progress. They rested a bit near a statue of a man on a horse. After a very short distance, they had to stop again for Mrs. Jarvis to scoop water from a fountain. And on they went, trudging and stopping, until Jim's mother could walk no more. She put her arms around Jim and pressed her head down to his shoulder. "Oh, God help you, Jim," she said. It seemed to Jim that she was simply tired then of walking, and she decided to go to sleep right there on the pavement. He squatted down beside her, glad for the rest, feeling a bit dizzy and tired himself, and was aware of a worry of voices all around him, like flies buzzing. And then someone shook him, and he opened his eyes. "Where do you live?" a voice said. Jim sat up. Already it was growing dark. There were people around him, and someone kneeling by his mother trying to lift her. "We used to live in a cottage," said Jim. "We had a cow and some hens." "Where do you live now then?" It was a different voice. This time, Jim tried to remember the name of the street where they had rented a room in Mr. Spink's big house, but he couldn't. He couldn't understand why his mother didn't wake up. He looked around for his bundle and saw that his wooden horse had gone, and he clutched Lizzie's old boots. I thought that might happen soon. Please excuse my daughter shouting her head off as well. "You haven't got nowhere?" the same voice asked. Jim shook his head. Someone was doing something to his mother, rubbing her hands, it looked like, dabbing her face with a shawl. "Get them to the workhouse," someone said. "There's nothing we can do for them now." "I'm not taking them there," another voice said. "Prison would be better than there." "Tell them we caught the boy stealing and let them put them both in prison." "Somebody stole my horse," Jim heard himself saying, but he couldn't keep his voice steady. "I didn't steal anything." "Give him his horse back," someone else said. "It's all he's got, ain't it? A pair of boots was too big for him, and a wooden horse. Give it back." There was a burst of laughter, and some children broke away from the group and ran off. The next minute, there was a shouting from the far end of the street, and the people who had been crouching around Jim and his mother stood up and moved away. He heard other voices and looked up to see two policemen. "Get up," one of the policemen ordered Jim, and struggled to his feet. "And you, get up," the other one said to Jim's mother in a very harsh voice. But she lay still. The first policeman waved his hand, and a boy with a cart ran up. Between them, they lifted Jim's mother onto it. Jim watched, afraid. "Take them to the workhouse," the policeman said. "Let them die in there, if they have to." The boy began to run then, head down, skidding on the snowy road, weaving the cart in and out of the carriages, and Jim ran anxiously behind. They came at last to a massive stone building with iron railings all around it. Weary people slouched there, begging for food. The boy stopped the cart outside the huge iron gates and pulled the bell. Jim could hear it clanging in the distance. And at last the gates were pulled open by a porter, who glared at them, his lantern held up high. "Two more for you," said the boy. "One for the infirmary, one for school." The porter led them into a yard. There on the steps on each side of the main door stood a man and a woman. A straight and thin and waxy face with a pair of church candles staring down at them. The boy held out his hand and was given a small coin, and the master and matron bent down and lifted Jim's mother off the cart and carried her into the house. The boy pushed his cart out and the porter clanged the gates shut. The matron poked her head sharply around the door. "Get in," she told Jim, and pulled him through. "You come and get scrubbed and cropped." The doors groaned shut. They were in a long corridor, gloomy with candle shadow. In front of them, a man trudged with Jim's mother across his shoulder. "Where's Ma going?" Jim asked, his voice echoing against the tiles like a whimpering of a tiny, scared animal. "Where's she going?" "Infirmary, that's where she's going. Wants feeding and medicine, no doubt, and nothing to buy it with neither." "Can I go with her?" "Go with her? A big strong boy like you? You cannot. If you're good, Mr. Sissons might let you see her tomorrow. Good, mind. You know what good means? The matron closed her ice-cold hand over his and bent towards him, her black bonnet crinkling. Her teeth were as black and twisted as the railings in the yard. She pulled Jim along the corridor and into a huge green room where boys sat in silence, staring at one another and at the bare walls. They all watched Jim as he was led through the room and out into another yard. "Joseph," the matron called, and a bent man shuffled after her. His head hung below his shoulders like a stumpy bird's. He helped her strip off Jim's clothes and sluiced him down with icy water from the pump. Then Jim was pulled into rough, itchy clothes, and his hair was tugged and jagged out with a blunt pair of scissors until his scalp felt as though it had been torn into pieces. He let it all happen to him. He was too frightened to resist. All he wanted to be was with his mother. He was led back into a huge hall and told to join the queue of silent boys there. They stood with their heads bowed and with bowls in their hands. There were hundreds and hundreds of people in one room, all sitting at long tables, all eating in silence. The only sounds were the scraping of the knives and forks and the noise of chewing and gulping. All the benches faced the same way. Mr. Sissons stood on a raised box at the end of the room, watching the boys who were still waiting for their food. Jim was given a ladle of broth and a corner of bread. "I don't want nothing," he started to say, and was pushed along into the queue. He followed the boy in front of him and he sat down on one of the benches. He glanced around him, trying to catch someone's eye, but none of the boys looked at him. They all ate with their heads bowed down, staring into the bowls. The boy next to him sneaked his hand across and grabbed Jim's bread. Jim ate his broth in silence. After the meal, the man with the hanging head gave Jim a blanket and showed him into a room full of shelves and long boxes where all the boys slept. He pointed to the box that Jim was to sleep in. Jim climbed into it and found that he only just had enough room to turn over in it, small though he was. He tied his boots to his wrist in case anyone tried to steal them. The dormitory door was locked and the boys lay in darkness. During the night, an old woman prowled up and down the room with a candle in her hand, holding it up to each boy's face as she passed. Jim could hear boys crying, stifling their sobs as she came and went, little puffs of sound that they were hardly there at all. He lay with his eyes closed, the candlelight burning red against his eyelids as she approached and stopped by him. He could hear her snuffly breath and the creak of her boots. He hardly dared to breathe. He lay awake all night, thinking about Emily and Lizzie and worrying about his mother. He longed to see her again. If she was better, maybe she could ask Mr. Sissons to let them go. As soon as it was morning, the door was unlocked. Old Marion's place was taken by the bent man. He shouted at the boys to queue up in the yard for their wash. "I've already broken the ice for you," he told them, "so no thinking you could dodge it." Jim ran after him. The man was so stooped that the top half of his body was curved down like a walking stick, and when Jim spoke to him, he swung his head around to look at the boy's feet. "Please, sir," Jim said. "I'm not, sir," the man said. "I'm only doing my turn. Like the rest of them, I'm only Joseph, not sir." He swung his head away from Jim's feet and spat on the ground. "I hate sir, same as you." "Please, Joseph, tell me where the infirmary is." "Why should I tell you that?" Joseph asked, his eyes fixed on Jim's feet. "Because my ma's there, and I've been good," Jim said. Mrs. Sisson said if I was good, I could go and see Ma in the infirmary today." "Ah, so you was the boy that came last night, and your ma was brought in a cart?" "Yeah," said Jim. "Please tell me where the infirmary is." Joseph made a little chewing noise. "Well, it's upstairs," he said at last. He rubbed his nose with the back of his hand and tilted his head sideways, squinting around at him. "Only the message I was given by Mrs. Sissons is, don't bother taking the boy out there, because his ma—" He stopped, and he shook his head and chewed again. "Your ma's dead, son." Right, that's the end of chapter 4. So things not looking too good for Jim. certainly looking good for his mum either. So what I thought you could do, nice little writing task you could do, just to write a description of the workhouse. So you might want to play it back and listen to it again if you've got time. That's one thing we have all got a lot of at the minute, a lot of time, to some of the descriptions of where he slept, where he was eating, the big gates outside, and how he felt and how it looked as he walked in. You could also do some research on the internet as well about the workhouse. If you if you ever read Oliver Twist, that's set in the workhouse, so you get some good ideas there. Very similar ideas in Oliver Twist to Street Child, both set in Victorian London in the 1860s. So yeah, and in your description, you can just mention everything that we've read so far. You might want to add some of your own description. One thing you can include in your writing are some iSpace starters. You might have done these in your school. I know my class have. So if you're not in my class, this is something you might want to be able to use. We call them iSpace starters. You can just see it there, hopefully. So these are different ways in which you can start a sentence. So you've got the I for ing starters. You can start with a simile. You can start with a preposition. You could start your sentence with an adverb. You can start with a conjunction. You can start with an ED starter, or you can start with dialogue. Now this is a descriptive piece, so you might want to use dialogue in this because you're just describing what you can see. So you might want to focus on the I space rather than the description part of it. But again, try and enjoy your writing. Really challenge yourself. Don't stick to something boring. Don't just start with the or it. Start with some really adventurous sentence openers and just have a go. Challenge yourself and try and just really enjoy your writing. That's why we're doing this. Try and keep enjoying our writing. As teachers, we love teaching writing. There's nothing we like more than reading a really adventurous piece of writing by somebody who's really proud of it. And that's what we want you to do, to be proud of everything you've done. So hopefully you enjoyed that chapter and you're enjoying your writing. And I'll see you again for chapter 5. Okay, so remember, stay at home, stay safe and be kind. See you soon. Bye bye.